Wabarakatuh. Hello, welcome to Thirsty Soul. Today I'd like to talk to you about a book I've been reading lately called Eyre. Actually, I've been reading for the past 3 months, but finally finished reading it, and I think it's such a great book. I'd like to share my thoughts on it with you. So I'm just gonna get started straight away. For those of you who don't know anything about this book, it's basically about a lady called Jane Eyre who is a governess, who is somebody who, what's the descriptor? Someone who tutors children of the rich, really, back in the 19th century. So this lady Jane Eyre, she's tutoring a child who comes from a wealthy background and ends up in a love affair with her boss. And it's kind of exploring the dynamics of that. I would say is the main storyline. But I think there's so much more to the book than that. There's so much imagery of nature. There's so many things about class, about gender, about religion, about even race and colonialism. So it's such an interesting book, but a lot of people just focus on that bit of it and don't really remember the other bits of it, really. So yeah, I just want to briefly talk about the theme of, I think, gender and independence, because I think it's such a big theme of the book. Jane Eyre, she's an author, and she kind of has to find her way by herself in the world, in a world where women weren't really independent. Being a governess was basically the only good profession a woman could do. I'm sure there were other professions they could do that we shan't talk about, but it was the only respectable profession a woman could do. But at the same time, it put the woman in a bit of a limbo, really, because you weren't a lower class and you weren't an upper class. You were in this middle, and you weren't really even middle class. You were educated to an upper class level, but you weren't an upper class. And in those days, class was so important in English society. So I think a lot of governesses felt kind of out of place, and Charlotte Bronte herself was also a governess. And you could tell by the book that she was a very highly educated woman. However, she was probably this in-between place in society, and that probably inspired her to write this book. And Jane Eyre, she's such a strong character. You know, she really wants to break free from what a woman is supposed to do in society. And there's so many quotes in the book where she talks about I'm not bird imagery is used quite a lot. She's like, I'm not a bird, I'm not this, I want an independent will, and I want to be able to pursue what I want to pursue in life. And time and again, she defies a lot of the men in her life, whether it's Mr. Rochester, her boss, or another man she meets later called St. John Rivers, who wants to marry her so she could go and be a missionary in India. And she's like, no, I'm not going to do that. But it's so difficult for her to break free from from I guess the confines of society, but she does it anyway. And I think that's why I personally really like the book, because she really fights with what society says she should be, and all these men in her life try to control her, and she's like, no, I'm not going to do it. And religion is also used quite a lot as a means to control society and women. And a lot of the men in her life try and use religion too, and like, oh, you have to do this to be a good Christian, and you have to obey me. And like the guy that I said wanted her to go to India, he was saying, this is the will of God and you have to do it. And I think a lot of us can relate to people trying to get us to do things in the name of religion that you, as somebody who knows more about the religion, knows is just absolute crap. But it's just amazing how these things that she was going through back then, I feel personally, even in the 21st century, I can definitely relate to a lot of the things she spoke about. Also, race is also a big issue, which is very ironic, because if you read the book, you might not notice it. But there is a character in the book who is from the West Indies, and she's Creole. And Creole is basically somebody who is of European descent, but grew up, like, for generations and generations, has been in the West Indies. And more than likely, they probably be mixed with a bit of African along the way, because of the way that slave masters used to rape the slaves. And this character, she's actually described as having a swollen black face. She's described as having, I guess, very ugly. She's described as ugly in a sense because she is from the West Indies. Although she's white, she's not pure white, and this is kind of used against her. And this lady, John Rees, she wrote this book called Wild Sargasso Sea, and she was so fascinated by this character in Jane Eyre that she decided, you know what, I'm gonna actually write about this woman, because the woman wasn't really talked about much in Jane Eyre, and she was only talked about from Mr. Rochester's perspective. For those of you who have watched the book or read the novel, you'll know who I'm talking about, the character Bertha, who is Mr. Rochester's wife. So this woman was like, you know what, she felt that this lady was not really represented well in Jane Eyre, that she wanted to give this woman a voice. So she actually wrote a whole book because she was that fascinated by the character in Jane Eyre. And I think she really goes to show us that everything is by perspective. When this lady talks about the backstory of Jane Eyre in Wild Sargasso Sea, sorry, I said the backstory of Jane Eyre, the backstory of this character Bertha, you understand her way more and realise, you know what, maybe she isn't just a mad woman in the attic. Maybe she does have her own story, and the fact that her husband married her and he was this English guy, the way he looked at her wasn't necessarily how she actually was. He was using his own racial prejudices to look at her and think her character was weird or unnatural, etc. And I think it's just fascinating how somebody was so captivated by Bertha in Jane Eyre that she actually wrote a whole book, and is really, really interesting. So I think those of you who are interested in colonialism, in slavery, anything like that, this Wild Sargasso Sea is really good, even if you don't like Jane Eyre. And it's quite a short book and way easier to read than Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is nearly 500 pages long and is written in very old English, so it takes a long time to digest. But yeah, I will definitely recommend both these books. They're really, really quite amazing, and I think books are such an important way to open our mind to different possibilities. When you see that in the 19th century there was these preconceived notions of people from the West Indies. Even from then, a woman who probably never went to this West Indies, Charlotte Bronte, already had these very negative perceptions. I think it shows a lot about our world and the way it is now, and how these views have been carried on generation after generation, as well as the relationship between men and women, and how you have a man like Mr. Rochester who has the ability to lock his wife in the attic, and also has the ability to do all these, to try and control Jane and her wealth, and so many things. So much imagery and so many things that he does are so powerful to show the relationship between the genders and how women didn't really have a role. That's probably why, later on you have the suffragette movements and things like that, because women couldn't even have an inheritance. You couldn't be anything but a governess in society if you were not rich. And this really controlled the lives of many people. So I would definitely recommend both these books, especially if you're somebody who really enjoys big themes, basically books that are really trying to portray the way life was at that time. I think they're both quite amazing books, and I'll put a couple of quotes, some good quotes that I felt that really represent the book as a whole, up before I end the video. So thank you for listening to me today, or just a short brief of what I thought Jane Eyre was all about. And yeah, if you've got any questions or you've got any book recommendations for me, please comment down below and please subscribe. Thank you for watching. Bye.